Welcome to Nasdaq Trade Talks. I'm Jill Malandrino, Global Markets Reporter at Nasdaq. Joining me for this segment, we have Ben Jones, Senior Index Specialist with Nasdaq Index Research. We're going to take a look at the Nasdaq-100 and how it correlates to cybersecurity and cloud companies. Of course, it's October and it's cybersecurity month. So clearly a lot of those companies within the Nasdaq-100. Ben, it's great to see you as always. Welcome back to Trade Talks.
Thanks, Jill.
All right, let's take a look at your first slide here. Talk about some cyber attacks.
Yeah, so it is cybersecurity month, so we want to stay on that theme again this week. But we're going to take a little different track here. So what I want to do is highlight the link between cloud computing and cybersecurity, as well as show you some of these cloud computing companies in the Nasdaq-100 and why that's important. But before we do, I think it's important to take stock of really what's going on and why cybersecurity is so relevant and why cloud computing is so relevant. And if we look back at the past year and a half or so, we've seen just a massive increase in the number of cyber attacks, as well as just the number of different types of cyber attacks and how it's impacted basically every major sector and industry. If you look at a Verizon report on the left-hand side, the 2020 incidents report, you can see how every sector was affected by some sort of attack, whether it was denial of service, whether it was lost or stolen assets. But what's important is that if we think about cloud computing and the work from home movement, we saw a number of different web-based attacks. And again, that's typically how cloud computing services are delivered, right, via the web or the internet. We also saw an increase in, or rather a diversity of system intrusions as well. And if you look at another study from Hackmageddon, you can see that the number one type of attack is malware. And if you think of malware, right, it's viruses, spyware, and of course, ransomware, which we all know has impacted a lot of different industries, especially as we saw in the industrial space with the Colonial Pipeline shutdown that happened back in May.
Right, Ben, it's, I always think about it when we get these phishing emails in our inbox and how they're getting, even in our text messages, how they're getting more and more real looking. And that's always the first thing I think of just, how it's almost like a cat and mouse game that we have to play. But on your second slide, I thought it was interesting. You had mentioned before the number of attacks going up from work from home. So with that said, how many executives are looking to continue to rely on cloud?
A lot, right? 90% of execs, let's say, or at least of companies rather, are really looking to use kind of hybrid cloud in 2022. And this is important because if you look at the height of the pandemic, 90% of execs said that based on increase in cyber attacks during the work from home movement that occurred last year as a result of the COVID-19 pandemic. And it's important to remember, there was a great title of an article, Jill, from Forbes back in June 2020 that said cloud is the backbone of remote work. But if you think about remote work and the work from home transition, is that 69% of IT professionals and execs in the C-suite space are concerned that the work from home movement and that transition to remote work has exposed security risk, right? 69%. So if we continue to see, let's say, a migration to the cloud or a hybrid cloud, the way that business is transacted or managed or operated, then you have to be able to answer those cybersecurity questions, right? You have to be able to control for it because there's a number of different cloud threats. And I throw this in the slide, right? Data breaches, misconfigured cloud controls, inefficient identity protocols and access management issues. So there's a number of issues that companies need to consider when they are transitioning to the cloud. And a lot of those questions are cybersecurity related.
Right. And Ben, of course, the Nasdaq-100 is the home to the most innovative global companies. And we can see on this last chart here just how many have touch points as it relates to cybersecurity.
Yeah, and cloud, right? So if we look at the Nasdaq-100 today, we see that there's a growing number of cybersecurity companies that are becoming a part of this index, right? That represents innovation and growth of the modern economy. We just saw, CrowdStrike join the Nasdaq-100. But there's also a number of cloud computing companies, right? And there's a strong link between cloud computing and cybersecurity, right? Because cybersecurity kind of enables cloud to operate securely. So if you look at these companies, some of them are some of the largest, companies in the world, right? Think Amazon, Microsoft, Google. We also see some other interesting, cloud companies within the Nasdaq-100. Cisco is an example, Workday. But if you look at the Nasdaq-100 today, roughly 20% of the index is comprised of companies that are classified as cloud, and these are members of, let's say, our ISC CTA Cloud Computing Index. So cloud plays a major role in today's economy, especially with the rise of remote work, but it's also represented in the Nasdaq-100 as well.
Right. It's also represented in how you and I meet virtually every week. Ben, thanks so much for joining us on Trade Talks. I'm Jill Malandrino, Global Markets Reporter at Nasdaq.